It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are. And like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. This is Gail of Gaia, and this is Free Range, where we graze on wild ideas, and we have wonderful guests. And I am delighted and happy to have with me today Anon. And we're going to talk about the jail system in the United States and who benefits. Does society benefit, or who in society actually benefits? We have mass incarceration in the United States, and we're going to talk about that. So let me bring SG on. Hi, SG.
Hey there, good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Oh, welcome. I feel honored to have you on. And I think we're talking about a very important subject that people are not aware of, a lot about what goes on in the American jail system, whether it be county jails or prison. So I have a couple of articles, or I have something I could share if you want before we get started, or we can wait until we talk about it some more. But I know that the United States incarcerates far more people than most countries, industrialized countries, and our jails are in very bad condition. So have you heard anything about that, SG? You're in contact with a lot of people.
Indeed, at different points along the way, this is an issue that's been brought to my attention, and it's one I've done a considerable amount, actually, of personal research into. And if you want, we can start with some of these documents and articles you were going to share there, but sort of we're casting it against the backdrop, I think, of our discussion today, that the prison industrial complex that exists in the United States of America is just exactly that. This is a slave labor for-profit workforce. Many of the inmates within, the U.S. prison system are compensated at a rate of about 40 to 50 cents to $1.50 per day for 8 to 10 hours worth of work. They're charged $4 and $5 for things like peanut butter at the commissary. They're charged over $5 a call, usually, on outgoing calls from these institutions. And of course, as you can imagine, the government has profiteering fingers all over it, with the state entities, the state organizations benefiting from the work of prisoners' hands, such as all of the prison systems in the United States that produce furniture for state and public government offices, right? Chairs and couches, things of this nature, things that they're compensated, again, 50 cents a day for to make. So this is no different than El Salvador, right? This is no different than a Soviet gulag here in the United States of America. We like to think that that prison industrial complex is built on some more noble idea of slave labor, in and of the fact that inmates are assumed to have been convicted of a legitimate crime. But as we've clearly seen with President Trump in recent days, the justice system ad hoc does not work in the way that we believed it once did, and that we've always thought that it did. It has had a very festering corruption for a very long time, certainly since the close of the Second World War, that has made the U.S. due process system essentially unrecognizable. It has been one of the most lethal silent weapons against the productivity and the wealth of the American middle class.
And I think certain people are easily targeted too. I think if they ever get into the system, they're more easily targeted by law enforcement. And I really think that what's going on here is a RICO set up in many ways, because there are people that are profiting from that incarceration. And many people, especially here in the state of Arizona, We have a very high incarceration rate. It's according to a report, more than 50% of people in Arizona prisons had mental health needs, and nearly 30% demonstrated a moderate to high mental health need. Not to mention the fact that they're creating mental health needs by jailing somebody for many times victimless crimes, or many times they already have some type of addiction problem or mental problem or something like that. Putting them behind bars just causes more damage, giving them more reason to use when they get out, and they also is used inside. So it's really turned into a horrific situation, but most people aren't aware of it.
That's absolutely true. And, I'll go so far as to say this, Gail. I have a whistleblower report that's been sent to me just in the last couple of years that detailed a story of an inmate that was instructed to lift very, very large sacks, very canvas sacks of books in a relocation project that was happening inside one of the U.S. Department of Correctional Institution systems. And I'm not actually able to say that system on air. But in this project, in this carrying through this relocation of books, all of these inmates were used essentially as donkeys to move we're talking thousands of books out of a prison legal library and into another form of storage there on the grounds of the site. And this particular inmate injured himself in so doing. Now, remember, inmates are not allowed to refuse an officer's instruction. It's considered insubordination. And so you can actually incur greater punishments and retaliation, oftentimes in the form of very intentional retribution inside these institutions for non-compliance. And so this is a situation where, the choice, the option to participate in this activity or not participate in this activity is simply not there. And this inmate is in their 60s, right? So this is not an easy undertaking to be lifting heavy canvas sacks of books. It was estimated that these sacks were anywhere from 70 to 100 pounds each. So that's the equivalent of a military rucksack, right? And you have individuals that are poorly nourished, that do not have a good environment to sleep in. Yes, some of them are there because they are in fact guilty of the things they do. I'm not willing to go out on the whim that many people are and to claim that a great many of them are innocent, but some of them truly are innocent. There is a vast swath of them that is categorically overcharged and overpunished by the system itself, which lends us back to that profiteering discussion we were having just a moment ago, right? How long can you monetize an asset? That's the principle behind that idea. And so anyway, coming back to this whistleblower story, this individual injured their back, went to the on-site medical unit, the infirmary there on the grounds, and was essentially told that there's nothing they can do. He's not entitled to any scans. The injury itself is not severe enough to justify taking this person off site. And so he was issued a cane, told to take some Advil and walk it off. Now, I'm not privy to what has happened beyond that. I'm not privy to this individual's health at the present day and time. But I can say that if you have a system which is telling individuals to walk off back injuries, and you don't have a right or entitlement to a scan of what that injury may have been, yet you incurred that injury in the service of the institution by instruction, not by willful compliance, how is that not a violation of cruel and unusual punishment in the Constitution?
That's exactly what it is. And based on the story that you got, I got another story that a lot of guys, when they're sick, are told by the department, just drink some water, drink more water, which undoubtedly is fluoridated water. I also think that they very liberally give people extended time in isolation. And I think it's a form of psychological warfare on the individual to force them into a plea or something that where they get to the point, well, anything's better than where I am right now, so I'll just sign this. I don't care. It doesn't matter if I did it or not. I want to get out of here. That happens to quite a few. And also, I know that in the state of Arizona, and I know that I interviewed a man that wrote Report to the Governor, which was John Harris Thaler. It's in my list of shows on Rumble about the level of corruption in the state of Arizona and the number of judges judges who are on the take, the bribery that goes on with the prosecutors and the cartel and all kinds of issues. But it's a horrible problem, and people just, we're so brainwashed that we don't see the other side of the coin. The side, if you're put in those shoes, and I think the J6ers are getting a good taste of what it's like when you're not even, when you're innocent. And sometimes even if something happened, what a person could be unjustly punished extremely because of the benefits. Now, I don't know if you got any information on this, SG, but I was told at one point in time, like, I believe this is a county jail, they get like $6,000 a day from the feds for inmates, and they keep them in there unconvicted for years, especially in this state because it's known as a prison state.
I don't have any information personally on Arizona specifically, but I will say that story sort of echoes the same flavor of the nepotistic corruption and the financial corruption that exists throughout the prison legal profiteering complex. And that's what I term it. I call it the prison judicial profiteering complex. We have a justice system here in the United States of America based on good principles, based in sensible, the Bill of Rights is an extremely well-crafted document. It sort of captures the essence, the spirit, the principle of the thing that has to apply for it to be considered true due process. And yet we have a system now, while built on those principles, has run amok in anything but, right? We have the DOJ clearly showing us, for example, what's on display with President Trump, the weaponization of the Justice Department, the weaponization of the legal process, the tyranny of the FBI, which is a federal law enforcement agency. And it's worth noting that the FBI holds tremendous clout at the state and local level as far as jurisdictional oversight and overreach, and the ability to move into an area and make it an absolute living hell on local law enforcement that may actually be patriotic and trying to do their job correctly. So we have a system that is purposefully imbalanced. We have a finger on the scale towards the corruption side, because if you cooperate with those national and federal authorities at that state and local level, you get money, you get favor, you get promises not to interfere in certain investigations, or promises that you will not conduct other styles of investigations of a federal crime nature, right? This is how the corruption works. And the profiteering prison system is the monetized arm of that corruption that we're talking about, right? Mississippi burning in real time here in the United States of America, and it has been going on for a very long time. You know, we sort of have countercultural understandings, for example, that prison systems in Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or Oklahoma or the Plain States or even the great out west of the 19th century were extremely poor in their quality, typically weaponized against specific demographics of people. At one point in our history, it was certainly the African-American demographic. And now that weaponization, especially in the last half of the 20th century and in the beginning of the 21st century, has been expanded to include we the people of all ideologies, demographics, and backgrounds, right? Those that are vulnerable to the system in a mental health capacity, those who are vulnerable to the system in the sense that they're too loud for the system, they're making too much noise, they're poking their head into places that it shouldn't be, right? The weaponization of law enforcement and the prosecutorial office and that pulpit of power, which is an extraordinarily empowered position, almost really disproportionately so in the United States legal system as compared to a magistrate level position anywhere else in the Western world or the world over for that matter. So we have a construct that has been built over the last, say, 80 to 100 years here in the United States that has entirely inverted due process on its face. Our Bill of Rights was abrogated a long time ago and was sort of put into a subservient public facade service position where the masses were kept quiet and cooperative, believing that they did have those rights preserved, whereas the actual truth of the matter behind the judgeships, the courtships, the law enforcement agencies, the incestuous relationship between bureaucracies local, county, and state and federal government officials and federal government positions of power, right? This is at all levels in our system. It's one of the reasons, Gail, personally, that I believe this process, which I purport to say is continuity of government here in the United States of America, this is one of the main reasons I believe that this process had to occur, because in order to map that level of corruption, in order to truly understand where the levers are turning, where the junctions are making the imprisonment of innocent people and the weaponization of the judiciary as a point of focus, where these things are occurring, need to be interceded with, and they need to be properly destroyed by we the people. But we can't get on with that process until we have a true understanding of what our actual system here in the United States is in the background.
And it's also, I don't know if you see the chart that I put up, the incarceration rates of people and how it's gone up over the years. The only reason it's gone up is because there's money involved. Whenever there's money involved, this kind of thing happens. It just has driven our country into things that really shouldn't happen. And then there's people who are warehoused in prison. They have extremely high cash bail. Okay, something that's totally not even remotely possible by not only the average American, but certainly not the low-income American. There's something wrong with that right there, okay? And then there's judges who forbid exculpatory evidence. That's another thing that comes into play. And they get bribed from anywhere from the government officials to cartel people and so on. I don't have any specific information on that, but money drives everything in this country. And the other thing that we see is a big difference in, let's see, what is it? Probation, the leading type of correctional control. Everybody that I've ever talked to tells me that the probation is set up in such a way that the slightest infraction will get you right back in jail again. And a lot of times it's at the discretion of people that really shouldn't be making decisions like that. I'm looking for the particular one that shows the difference in ethnic background, and I'm not seeing it at the moment. But anyway, if I find it here, here it is. Okay, look at this. Look at the difference between Black American Indians. They've always been incarcerating them, and then white, and then the total incarceration rate. But if you look at this group, what's common in this group? The very low income compared to this group, and even this group now. But still, even this group is twice as much as this. So this increases your likelihood of being incarcerated, but I think it's more related to economics than it is to race, or just as much so.
That's a fascinating observation, and I think I would have to agree with that for the simple reason that the poor classes of the world, right, the individuals that make up we the people that live in that sort of subprime and poverty level or just over poverty level positions, which is more and more a great deal of what was formerly a powerful middle class in the mid to late 20th century. That group is going to naturally be more vulnerable to just about anything, because the choice regarding the trade of time for money, the trade of labor of their hands for money, is a situation that's really a non-consent situation, right? You have to work, you have to provide. And so if you're in a class, an income demographic where everything that you do with the work of your hands during the waking hours of the day goes to providing for your immediate needs and satisfying the various bills and things that you may have, some of which you may have by choice and some of which you may not have by choice, such as, unexpected accidents and exorbitant medical costs, for example. Oftentimes that class of people fails to carry health insurance because it is so expensive in its own right. So you're looking at, a real possibility of these types of expenses adding fuel to the fire, and they are considerably less able to resist when something happens where they run afoul of the legal system, or maybe where the legal system runs afoul of them in a very unfortunate junction point, right? Where there may be a seeking to cover up a local crime syndicate, for example. This is a true thing. These things do happen in our communities. They happen within our towns and states, right? There are other situations where you simply have self-interested careerists who are trying to pad their belt and pad their notches, and they don't mind to do so on the suffering of other human beings. And that's exactly what the judicial system and this idea of, moving through that in an elected way, and then a law enforcement way, and then maybe even as a public servant way later on, it lends itself to needing to be tough on crime, which means that we need to leverage the hammer of the system more than the compassionate hand of the system, right? And so, looking at things like this and discussing, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No. I just meant there is no compassion in the system as I've seen it. I've seen that in my experience and people that I've talked to. Because here's another thing, and I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but here's another thing that I don't want to forget to bring up, because it's really critical. We have an extremely high recidivism rate. People come back in. Well, this is what they do to people. They put them in jail. Let's say they were in there for 5 years. Maybe they should have been in there for 1 or 2 at the most. But anyway, say they were in there 5 years. They've lost everything. They've probably been forgotten about by any family members. They don't have cars. They don't have clothes. They get out. And in Arizona, everything's a felony. It's hard to get a place to stay. If you haven't got somebody that's going to help you when you get out, how are you supposed to survive? How are you supposed to live? The employers will ask for a background check. They won't want to hire you. The housing people, they won't want to let you in a place because of that felony. And I mean, it just goes on and on. You set them up to fail when they get out and wonder why they end up back in, when the only options that they may have had was maybe to steal something or get some money from. And I don't see how that's much different than the system extorting money from the people. So that's just my opinion, but I've seen what it's done to people, and it's
absolutely. And you raise a very important point, and it's exactly, this is ironic because this is exactly where my train of thought was about to proceed to. The encouragement back into the system, the intentional imbalance that we have with those poor demographics, right? It makes them very vulnerable to running afoul of the system again. And so the system is designed to encourage an extraordinarily tight and high rate of recidivism because you have an economic motive at the core. This is a profiteering complex. This is a human indentured servitude for-profit complex. And so when you have lots of capital to draw from, when you have lots of indentured servants to monetize, right, and to produce these items of value and these things of value that the state then utilizes for its own ends and its own aims. This is one of the reasons the tax system, as it pertains to allocating certain amounts of public money for purchases of the government, is such a complete and total fraud. None of that tax money that is paid for the purposes of acquiring property for the government usually goes towards that. Very little, if any. I'm not a financial advisor, but I would say less than 10% in my own personal uncredentialed opinion, that less than 10% of that is actually going towards the property that they say, because that property is manufactured by this system. And so in order to enable the government money laundering profiteering complex that all of our elected officials, whether they know it or not, are participating in, you need a perfectly imbalanced judicial system aimed primarily at vulnerable classes of people, which is what we've just described, to make this possible. And this is why in the United States of America, we have more than 26% of the entire incarcerated population of planet Earth. And yet we have less than 4.5%, based on the most recent numbers, of the population of the planet itself. That is an extremely disproportionate angle relative to the proportion of incarcerated individuals. But the American taxpayer, in league with the American prison profiteer complex, literally finances the entirety of the world.
Absolutely. And let's not leave the courts out of this, because the courts are profiteers as well. I mean, unless you included that in that, but they are a business and they're registered with Dun and Bradstreet rather very stealthily. And the public defender, which anyone who's in these lower income groups will call you, is a public pretender, not a defender, because they don't really represent the people, because all three of them, the prosecutor, the judge, and they're all paid by the same company. Okay. So the public defender is paid by the court system, so is the prosecutor, and so is the judge. And we're not taking into account their bribes or their career advancement because they got so many convictions, or the police, their quotas for how many arrests they make. It's gotten, because of the financial nature of this, it's gotten totally out of hand in terms of why people do what they do. And you saw the same thing happen in the medical field, and I don't want to go there right now, but whenever there's a financial incentive of some sort, the whole perspective of compassion or caring or trying to do what's really right for the individual is lost.
It absolutely is. And that's one of the reasons the framers of the Constitution highlighted high crimes and misdemeanors alongside bribery. And they specifically named bribery, which tells me that the framers understood the gravity that financial crime could actually cause, the type of events that financial crime, high financial crime in pulpits of power, to include government, elected officials and judges, many of whom are elected, some of whom are appointed here in the United States, depends on which state that you're in. But the framers understood that the bribery component of human nature was fatalistic. It was a mortal situation if you had a government that was captured by any amount of financial or nepotistic corruption. And we have both, here in the United States of America. We have, extreme billionaire donors out there across all political ideologies who donate to the processes, the election campaigns. Right now many of us know that those are selected as well. So the donations even are sort of questionable. Are they financing election fraud, for example? Are they financing criminality to encourage a certain outcome? I think with people like Mark Zuckerberg, you could certainly say yes, right, with the Zucker boxes of the 2020 election in Wisconsin. And yet many of those billionaires have entanglement within the prison profiteering complex themselves. The billionaire owner, for example, of a group called Platinum Equity, which is the ownership and management group of the Detroit Pistons athletic team, the NBA team, I believe it's NBA. That individual is also, through Platinum Equity, is also the owner of Securus Communication Systems, which is one of the largest phone and telecom systems utilized for inmate to exterior world communication from within the Department of Corrections nationwide. And that is a system that has been, in my own personal opinion, responsible for the extortion of millions of dollars from inmates and families of inmates, because again, you're talking about a system that pays these individuals around $1 per day, but charges them $5 and $6 per phone call. So you're talking about trading,
Yes.
And these phone calls are limited in time to around 25 to 30 minutes, depending on which state you're in and their local policies. So you're trading literally a week's worth of work for 30 minutes of conversation and contact with the outside world. And this is fundamentally nepotistic, because you have individuals who own companies like Securus Communications that make very large financial donations to the local, state, and federal electoral process, right? And those donations ensure that the profiteering complex remains in power. So this is a very deep-seated corruption that is concentrated, as we've talked a little bit about, on this call. It's concentrated around money and finance. And until we divorce financial corruption from the judiciary itself, until we make it impossible for a judge to be bribed in the capacity that we have seen in the last 120 years here in the United States of America, I don't think that we'll see intense movement forward on this issue. It's one of the reasons, again, I'm going to highlight that this continuity of government operation needed to take place, because we needed to have the lawful right to deploy the entirety of the reconnaissance, mapping, and surveillance technology and technological capabilities available to the U.S. military to turn it inward on the nation and figure out just how exactly we accomplished the largest scale of domestic treachery, I think, that has ever been seen in the history of the world.
Yes, and we're getting some comments in about people that are seeing what's going on or have experienced it themselves. Mathis said, my lawyer, the judge, and the prosecutor were all in this together, had no idea what I was pleading to. This felony indentured me to the state. This kind of thing goes on far more than people realize. Once you get caught up, it's really very serious. And it's not here in Arizona. I can speak to this because I've known a few people that have been in their system. The phone calls, 15 to 20 minutes will cost you probably around $4, which is a lot. If you and these people need outside contact. Okay, then they have a tablet system that they've brought in so that they have something to do in there. Which is very expensive. It was like when we first got cell phones and they were charging you like 16 cents a minute or something like that. That's about how expensive these tablets are. And then there's commissary, a chance to give them something so they don't have to just eat the food, which is one of the biggest complaints of all. And who knows what they actually provide or what grade of food they actually give. And that's really another major aspect. Here we go. Let me see. Also, they make you produce products in jail for 10 cents an hour, which is what you were addressing earlier, correct? And the garbage food is marked up 1,000%. So if you want to buy ramen noodles, which I don't really recommend, you're not going to pay a quarter for them like you. Maybe they've raised the price now here, but you're going to pay probably $1.50 or $1.25 for them at least, so they mark stuff way up. It's all a part of extortion, not only from the individual who's already locked in a cage. Okay. That is bad enough. But here are these other items that in order for them to have any contact with their family or loved ones, it requires money. And again, who's that going to hurt the most? The lower income people. And if we didn't have this problem, I don't think there'd be anywhere near as many people in here. If this GCR or reparations or any of that actually happens, crime rates would go down. We have med beds. These people could go through a med bed regimen and be released, in my opinion, because being locked in a cage is not going to help anyone.
Well, I will say, I think at the end of the day, and in the spirit of a good discussion here, I want to highlight that where I stand on this issue, I think, is probably going to be more akin to the fact that while there may be a tremendous amount of individuals, and I do believe this is the case, that are wrongfully imprisoned, and I think there is an even greater amount, quite frankly, a much higher proportion than we're aware of here at the population level, that is overcharged and over-sentenced, over-punished within that system. I also understand the need for some sort of internment system that provides true rehabilitation, right? We would like to look at the criminal justice system and think that punishment is not a part of it, that it's supposed to be a rehabilitative type situation. And I think we can achieve that in a truly common law-based world. I think that's going to take quite a bit of work to get there, potentially a couple of decades really to iron something like that out. But in the interim, I also understand the need to remove true violent individuals, true individuals that would terrorize society, such as all of our public servants right now here in the United States of America, to remove them from society and to provide some sort of rehabilitation that may also have some unpleasantries involved. And we could have a discussion about unpleasantries, within the framework of staying outside of cruel and unusual punishment, that I think is important as a nation to have. my main focus, I think, with a lot of this, and I really want to highlight this for the audience out there too, Gail, because I think it's important for them to know, is that we have a system that is fundamentally imbalanced. It is set on its cornerstone in the wrong way. And if we don't pull that cornerstone back out and have a discussion about why it is so, why court systems have commercial IDs with a business entity, why oaths of office that we've now tracked out, even with judges, are sworn to the International Monetary Fund, right? This is not conjecture. These are FOIA requests that show that we have a not only a financial, but a foreign financial involvement in our judiciary here in the United States. And that involvement leads to every bit of the corruption that we've been talking about here. It leads to the incentivization of reincarceration, right? It leads to the over sentencing and overcharging and the passing of bills that purposefully allow for greater and greater punishments while not addressing true core election or true core criminality issues that have occurred here in the United States that have painfully obvious evidence that all of us, we the people, are aware of, right? This is a major component to the discussion. The prison profiteer system is relevant to the election fraud system. It's relevant to the COVID-19 big pharma criminal cartel system. It's relevant to the hegemony of control that emanates from Silicon Valley, that emanates over and above American entertainment, American sports, American tech, right, and cyber capabilities. This profiteering complex is a major black market money generation system that enables the flow of drugs to these low-income communities, of human trafficking to these low-income communities, to predispose these low-income communities by purposefully impoverishing them at the political pulpit level of power. I'm getting so impassioned here. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. This is a very important concept for patriots to grasp. We do need punishment and rehabilitation. That is a need in any organized society. That's the purpose of law, is to keep people inside the social contract that we all sign, right? With due process and common law. And that contract, of course, being the Constitution for the Republic of the United States of America. So in that sense, the prison system may have some validity and some relevance even to the day and time that we live in. But if we don't reorient the compass of that, and if we don't disentangle that from these webs of corruption that we've highlighted on this call today, we will never be able to achieve a humanistic but still purposeful rehabilitation and consequential system that is necessary to preserve, I think, that grand society adherence to the common law contract that we all want to have anyway.
You know, I think what you're talking about has been demonstrated in a country like Denmark. They actually rehabilitate the people. There's an extremely low recidivism rate there as opposed to what we have here. And I'm wondering if one of the problems that we have too is, as we kind of mentioned, all of these guys are don't have signed oaths of office. This is a short little video I could show too. There was one other thing I wanted to bring up. My kind of slipped my mind at the moment, but maybe I'll. This is only like 2 minutes long, I think, and I think it's relevant because it's what part of the problem. Oh, I know what I was going to say. If anyone else was in the situation and didn't have the money that Trump has, they would be in jail already. Okay, because once they decide that's what they want to do to you, there's just no letting up. And he is fortunate that he is able to have the team that he has that, you know, keeps that from happening. But that hasn't stopped them from going after him either, has it? So that's another area where money comes in, because where I understand it, unless it's different from state to state, like in New York, I'm not sure, but any fine that a judge imposes, he gets a percentage. So that's a financial incentive right there to make a ridiculously high fine that you're
like $454 million.
Yeah. So if he got 40% of that, I don't know if you're real quick with math, but or even 45% of that, he's getting a chunk of money that probably goes into his 401k. And if I'm wrong about that, please, if anybody can prove that that's not correct, and I'm not sure about the exact amount, but there is a percentage that's granted to those judges. So that's a problem, because that's an incentive. That's like the doctors, when they give a shot, they get so much per shot. And if their whole, it can be big. It can be really big. And that's what's really bad. Hang on a second. I had something pop up here that shouldn't even be here. Okay. Let me play this video short here.
On January 10th of 1963, 45 current communist goals were submitted to the congressional record. Number 13 was, do away with loyalty oaths. 60 years later, on the very same day, Biden, Obrador, and Trudeau met in Mexico City for the Declaration of North America, which states a plan to unify North America under the ideas of diversity, climate change, migration, health, and regional security. The beginning of a North American Union, which is a step towards a one-world government. According to law, elected officials must swear an oath that they will support, defend, and bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And through the Freedom of Information Act, U.S. Attorney Todd Callender, along with his team, Project Proper Oath, found that not a single member of the existing cabinet has a valid oath of office. Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, has no oath of office. U.S. Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, has no oath of office and has also failed to register as a foreign agent, which is required due to serving on the boards and conducting international business with Raytheon, Nucor, and Tenet Healthcare. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has no oath of office. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has no oath of office. U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas has no oath of office. U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg has no oath of office. U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services Xavier Becerra, responsible for declaring a national emergency, has no oath of office. Former Director of the Centers for Disease Control Rochelle Walensky had no oath of office. U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith, responsible for investigating the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack, has no oath of office. U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia Matthew Graves, Chief Prosecutor of Jan 6ers, has no oath of office. Vice President of the United States Kamala Harris has no oath of office. Within 30 days of appointment to public office, all public officials are legally required to have a signed and notarized copy of their oath of office. And it appears as if no elected officials in the federal government have one. They are either non-existent, incomplete, or fraudulent. The fraudulent ones are missing signatures, are not notarized, and in most of them, the words, "So help me God," are in all caps. In the U.S. Constitution, "So help me God" is not in all caps. And this matters, as many have been telling us for decades, including the great Jordan Maxwell.
Today, the entire world of mankind under a world law, which is referred to as the law of the high seas or international maritime admiralty. When you were born, you came out of your mother's water. Since you out of your mother's water, you are a maritime product. This is why, when you were born, the doc has to sign your birth certificate. It's a maritime admiralty manifest showing that your mother brought you into the world and you were going to make money. Anything in this country, if it's a lawful legal document, signed, your name must be, according to maritime, be in all capital letters, because you do not own your body. You do not own yourself. all capital letters implies that you are a maritime admiralty product. You are not a human. You're not a living entity. You're a product. You're a living entity person. The actual you is represented under law by upper and lower case name. So you are a corporation or not, but you are merely a subsidiary of a larger corporation called United States. This is the way the law works.
Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.
Greg does some great work.
Indeed, and this serves to highlight exactly the situation of domestic corruption and treason that we're talking about, right? This is the scale of what has happened here in the United States of America. They will truly need to invent another word to encapsulate the style of betrayal and the level of betrayal and selling out of mankind, not just the United States, but the world as a whole, because of what happened to the United States, immediately after our Civil War during the 19th century, to really fully understand what has happened here. This is a case study on domestic insurrection that has literally been more than a century long at this point. If we trace that just back to the Federal Reserve System and the sheer unconstitutionality and the seditious conspiracy to deprive the United States government of its own currency and its ability to control its currency as outlined in the Constitution for the Republic of the United States, that in and of itself is an otherworldly level of treason and conspiracy that was committed, and yet it has produced the situation here in the United States of America alongside a vast scale of corruption, sort of branching off from that, that is untenable, I think. I think that, when Julian Assange comes out and says 98% of all governments worldwide are compromised to the core and they're not for we the people, I think this is actually what he's referring to. I think he's referring to just how deep the financial corporatized web of control actually goes, and just how fake, phony, and false the idea of an elected representative body in alignment with our true core constitutional values here in the United States, just how false that has actually been. We have evidence to show that the election fraud has been happening since the days of Nixon. Nixon was actually on record stating to a Chicago newspaper that he didn't challenge election fraud in the election, despite the fact that he ended up winning that process, because it would have torn the nation apart. So we're looking at a multi-generational problem. The prison system tying directly into the Admiralty law system worldwide. What is Admiralty law? Admiralty law is piracy. If you're on a pirate ship, you are their indentured servant. In fact, you agree in coming aboard the ship to bear true faith and allegiance only to the pirate body, and to give all of the work, all of the productivity, all of the rights that you may otherwise possess as a human being over to that supervisory body, typically the captain of the ship, right? Because you're now a part of the crew, you are not yourself. And so that's exactly what we have seen heaped onto the world. And if you are not yourself under the eyes of a commercial legal system, then you can be easily warped into an involuntary indentured servant, which is a violation of the 13th Amendment for the Constitution of the United States. So this is an incredible period of time, I think, that we're living in, Gail, because people are starting to unearth that insurrection has actually occurred bureaucratically. It wasn't just the November 2020 election. This has been happening for a long time. People are learning that the commercialization of our government, which we can see through the endless advertisements that strike us at every point in our journey, from the time we wake up to the time we close our eyes at night, right? This commercially focused system, this construct of society that we all live in, it permeates even our judiciary, and people are beginning to understand and appreciate what that really means. I have an optimistic view, I think, for those patriots in the future as we go forward, especially those that may be behind bars now trying to blow the whistle, or those that have history and lives that have been ruined by this type of system. I have high hopes that we'll see some sort of reconciliation and recompense offered, because we've all been made a product of a commercial slavery system here in the United States of America that essentially overplayed its hand when it went so far as to participate in the COVID pandemic and the 2020 election steal of the United States.
Yes, and then like Mathis said here, will the RV revisit old cases like that, like his, that were clearly driven by the prosecutor agenda? And because that is the problem. They all have, none of them have signed an oath of office, and if they did, they signed it to the corporation, not to our original Constitution. And that means every prosecutor, every bar attorney or judge, anyone that belongs to the bar is actually a foreign agent. And this is why they're saying they all need to be retrained in constitutional law. But I would think that all of these cases would be, Marcy said, I feel like all is null and void considering all was done under fraud, deceit, and manipulation. And I think that's true. How this is going to go forward and be corrected, I'm not sure. But I guess I know your time is short, so if you have any final words, please go ahead and put them out there.
Well, I think this is a great place to conclude, because we're talking about entering into a new era, and the RV itself will be, I think, a component of how this system plays out. Right, once we take finance and put it into a more sovereign-focused system, and that's actually being, I think, implemented in the background, literally. And I have some interesting knowledge of the matter based on conversations I've had with my own personal banker. But with respect to that, I don't think that that's the switch. I think that that is the match that lights a much broader pile. I think that we're going to see a cascade of events happen societally once we get a handle on this, endless corruption, right? This runaway corruption in government, in corporations, in international finance and business. All of it sort of ties itself together. The UK has a UK prison industrial profiteering complex, right? France has the same. Germany has the same. The United States is particularly vicious about it, but they have, but Canada also has one, and Mexico for the longest time had one, and we've seen sort of the destabilization of Central America lend to a blending of society really with that complex itself, which I would characterize as a regression, not progression. So moving through this, this RV and entering into this new period, I think that we remove the ability to corrupt one another in important pulpits of power, and we can have honest conversations about the things that happen. There are many corrupt judges, for example, who are blackmailed or who are being manipulated with death threats, and they're not actually against the idea of due process. They just went to the wrong party, or they participated in the wrong payoff, or maybe they had a moment of human weakness, and now they're forever captured by a system that will ruin their entire life as well. And I've personally believed that to be the case, because you have a mafioso style system at the top of society that is very unafraid and unashamed to deploy its own teeth against its own inner workings if it preserves the hegemony of the entire hydra, right? One head will eat another to preserve the beast itself. So in this process, in order to drag out the beast, we have to drain the blood from it, and the financial corruption, and a recess of some kind with the world financial commerce system, that I think is the opening salvo of major change, especially major corruption change. And I think something like that will lead us into a point where we can have an honest conversation, within each of our states and provinces and localities and municipalities worldwide. We can have a true honest conversation about what occurred here and how do we fix it, and then we can implement the fix. I'm very optimistic about it, but I think it will take some time to go back and adjudicate some of these, these cases that have come before, where people were overpunished, or were manipulated or coerced by the government, or where they were entrapped by law enforcement agencies. I think that the redress of those will come, but it will take some time, beginning with that, financial changeover.
Yeah, well, with a financial change, the chances of robbery and stealing, I think, will go down substantially because people will have basic needs met, especially in the lower income groups. But I'd like to also say this, just so that people are aware of it too. When you go into court and they do convict you or whatever, and they decide to send you to a jail or prison, the judge signs it, the prosecutor signs it, and the defense attorney or public pretender signs it also. So you got all three. What happens if the public defender wouldn't sign? That would be interesting to find out because I have no idea. But I know that they just all sign in order to be okay in the system so they can continue to extort money from people. Because the other thing of it is that's why nobody has any standing in the courts, because once you hire an attorney, that means you're an incompetent, like a mental retard that can't defend themselves. And that's a whole nother area. We might have to have another show on this sometime, SG. But I appreciate your input, and thank you very much for coming on the show. I know you have to take off. So that being said, thank you everyone for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe, and get this around to as many places as you possibly can, because this is information that people need to be aware of. I know there's a lot of people who might have an incarcerated friend or relative or something like that, and they become more and more aware of it all the time. But the system is rigged against you as an American citizen. Right now, they're just letting the illegals that come in, they're just letting them go, no matter what they've done. So there's a real problem in our system that needs to change, and the only way we're going to change it is by informing people. An educated populace is absolutely necessary to stop this injustice to American citizens.
Indeed. And it has been an honor to be back, and I hope to have further discussions with you in the future. Stay safe, and God bless.
God bless you too. Thank you so much, SG. And thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you again in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Found our way. It's a brand new day, and we'll be making history. Are you with me? Won't you stay? We have come so far. This is who we are, and like the rising sun, we have just begun to play our part. This is the time we form the chorus. Lift your voice for those before us. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors. We are heroes and dreamers. We are restless believers. Stronger than ever. Never say never. Don't look back now. Don't look back now. Stand with each other. We are sisters and brothers, fighting our place and running the race. We'll take our chance and seize the moment. Hold on tight and don't let go of all your hopes and dreams that light the way. We control our fate. Destiny awaits. We are all the actors in the stories we create. Hope will be our guide. We'll no longer hide. When we roll like thunder, feel the wonder from inside. We can rely on one another. Feel the pride, let's show our colors.